These are our last notes before your test. So we're talking one more time about parallel and perpendicular lines. This time we're going to focus on parallel and perpendicular equations. So what are we doing? Given a linear equation at a certain point, you can create another equation that passes through this point and is either parallel or perpendicular to the given line. Keep in mind the following points. So one thing you have to keep in mind is that parallel lines, remember, they have the same slopes. Perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. So that's something we learned in the last notes. So same slopes and then negative reciprocal slopes for perpendicular. So let's look at an example. It says write the equation of the line that passes through the point -2, 7 and is parallel to the line y equals -4x plus 1. All right, so we're going to write an equation. So the first thing we do is it says it's parallel, right? So it says it's parallel to this line. If it's parallel, remember it says that they have the same slopes. So what is the slope in this equation? It's -4. So if I'm trying to create a line that's parallel to this equation, I'm going to use the same slope. So I'm going to say, okay, well, that means I know m equals -4 because it needs to be the same slope as whatever that is. And it also passes through this point. Well, look what we have now. We have a slope and a point. Remember point slope? That's what we always start with when we have a slope and a point. So we're going to do y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Remember we plug a point into m, so I'm going to plug this -4 in for m. And I'm going to plug in, so I'm going to say y minus, remember this is always x1, y1. So y minus y1, which is 7, equals m, which is -4, times x minus -2. So this, now remember when you have two negatives right next to each other, it's a positive. And now we're just going to distribute like normal. So now it's just like normal. Y minus 7 equals -4x minus 8. The last step is to add 7 to both sides. So that cancels and we have y equals -4x, and then -8 plus 7 is -1. Now, let's take a look at this really quick. Does this have the same slope as this? If I were to say, is this line and this line parallel, you would say yeah, because -4 and -4, both of those are the same slope, -4, so they would be parallel lines. All right, number 2. Write the equation of the line that passes through the point 3, -1 and is parallel to the line y equals 1/3 x minus 3. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say, okay, parallel, just like above, parallel means the same slope. So if we're going to have the same slope, m equals, well, what's the slope here? 1/3. So m has to equal 1/3 on my new line. So I know, okay, now I know my slope is 1/3. And what's the point? Well, my point is 3, -1. So let's label that x1 and y1 if you need to. And then let's plug it into this form. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So we have y minus this point, -1, equals, my m is 1/3 times x minus, and my x1 point is 3, +3. So x minus 3. Then we're going to look for two negatives next to each other. Y minus -1 is the same thing as y plus 1. And then we're going to distribute here. So we have y plus 1 equals 1/3 x. And then what's 1/3 times -3? Remember we put it over 1, multiply across, so -3 over 3, which is -1. So 1/3 times -3 is -1. And then we have to collect like terms, so subtract 1 from both sides. This cancels. And we have y equals 1/3 x minus 2. Remember, -1 minus 1 is -2. So that's it. Now remember, we're trying to find a line parallel. Is this line parallel to this line? Yes, because they have the same slope, right? 1/3 x, 1/3 x. Okay, so we do the same thing every time it's parallel. Now, if we have a perpendicular line, write an equation of the line that passes through that point and is perpendicular to y equals 2x minus 4. So in this case, instead of finding a line parallel, we're finding a line perpendicular. If we're finding a line perpendicular, that means it's going to be opposite or negative reciprocal slopes, right? So look at our slope here. Our slope here is 2, right? So this slope is 2. But the negative reciprocal slope, so the perpendicular slope of that, is -1/2, right? So I need to plug in -1/2 for my slope. Do you see how I got that? So I know it tells me perpendicular to this line. Well, this slope is 2. A perpendicular slope is -1/2. Remember, it's the negative and then reciprocal, which is 1/2. And then we're going to use this point. So we're still going to use x1, y1, and now we're going to do the exact same thing. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So y minus, my y1 is here, it's 3. So y minus 3 equals, my m is -1/2 times x minus, and my x point, my x1 is 4. So now we distribute and solve. Y minus 3 equals -1/2 x. Now a -1/2 times a -4, so -1/2 times a -4. So it's a positive 4/2, because -1 times 4 is positive 4, and then 2 times 1 is 2. So 4/2 is 2. So I'm going to say plus 2. And then I just continue to solve. So I'm going to add 3, add 3. So y equals -1/2 x plus 5. Now, if I were to give you this line, this line, and this line, those two equations, would you tell me that these two are perpendicular? Yes, because this slope is 2, and this slope is -1/2. So they're perpendicular, so we did that right. All right. Now we have to write an equation of the line that passes through -5, 1, and is perpendicular to this line right here. Y equals -1/2 x minus 4. So the slope on this line is 1/2. -1/2, I'm sorry. So what is my new slope? So slope is -1/2, but my perpendicular slope, remember, parallel is the same slope. My perpendicular slope is the negative reciprocal. So what's the negative reciprocal of -1/2? Well, instead of making it negative, I'm going to make it positive, right? Change the sign. And instead of 1/2, I'm going to make it 2/1 or 2. So my perpendicular slope to -1/2 is just 2. And I'm going to still use this point, x1, y1. So y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. I'm going to use my perpendicular slope, which is 2. And I'm going to use my point. So y minus, what's my y1? 1 equals, my new slope is 2 times x minus, and my x1 is -5. And then we make this a plus. minus a negative is a positive. We're going to distribute here, and we have y minus 1 equals 2x plus 10. And the last step is to add 1 to both sides. So we're doing the same thing every single time, right? It's just the only difference is if you have to find the slope. So if it's parallel, it's the same slope. If it's perpendicular, it's opposite negative reciprocal slope, right? Or opposite reciprocal, either way you want to think of it. So are these two lines perpendicular, this one and the one we started with? Yes, negative 1/2 was the original slope, 2 is my new slope, and those two are perpendicular. All right, so you're going to try the same thing. I'm going to do 5, and you're going to do 6. So let's just do, it's the same exact thing. So now we have to write an equation that's parallel, same thing. So what's the parallel slope of y equals 2x plus 4? It's the same slope, so it's m equals 2. And then I plug it into my equation. This is x1, this is y1. So y minus negative 1 equals, my slope is 2 times x minus, my x1 is 4, negative 4. This is a positive, this is a positive, okay? So now we have y plus 1 equals 2x plus 8, and then subtract 1 from both sides. 2x plus 7. Are those two parallel? Yes, because this has a slope of 2, this has a slope of 2, those two are parallel. So you try number 6. Raise your hand when you're finished. Okay. So show me. All right, let's try number 9, and then you guys are going to try 10. Okay, so here we're finding a slope that is perpendicular. Remember, perpendicular is negative reciprocal slope. So my slope here is a positive 3/4. So my new slope is going to be a negative reciprocal, 4/3. Okay, so now let's plug it in. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Remember, again, this is point slope form, and we're getting it into slope intercept. So we have y minus my y1 point, let's label since we've been doing that, x1 and y1. Negative 3 equals, my m, my slope is negative 4/3, x minus, and my x1 is 3. All right, this is a positive. Y minus negative 3 is really y plus 3. It's the same thing. Now I'm going to distribute here. Negative 4/3x. Now, negative 4/3 times 3. Oh, times negative 3. So be careful with the signs. I even messed that up right now. Negative 4/3 times negative 3. Make sure you're really pay attention to the signs. So that's a positive 12/3, which is 4. It's a positive 4. So I'm going to write a plus in front of that. And then I'm going to subtract 3 to both sides. So y equals negative 4/3x. 4 minus 3 is plus 1. Positive 1. Okay. Is this perpendicular? Yes. Look at my slope. My slope is negative 4/3. My original was 3/4. This is negative reciprocal to my original slope, so it is perpendicular. Okay, you guys try number 10 and show me. And show. Okay.